You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Happy Wednesday. This is a podcast that is a part of OMD Ventures. It's an ecosystem I created to be the place where people can be inspired to be unconventional in their careers as well as just in all aspects of life. And I'm doing this thing where I'd like to get closer with my community. And so if you want to ask questions, please reach out in the contact page and I'll try to kind of amass questions and have an AMA episode. So that would be really cool to do. So help contribute to that. And you can find the instructions at omdventures.com/contact, as well as support the community or be part of it by subscribing to the newsletter where I share the weekly learnings, the essays, and the podcast episodes of the week. That's all publicly available. And I think the only mainly exclusive thing will be that I actually started writing commentary on the week-by-week progression or just what I've gone through in the journey of building this platform, as well as just in my own career journey in general. So if you'd like to, follow along, then the newsletter is the place to do it. But yeah, now today's featured guest, well, it's an anonymous podcast, another anonymous series. If you're not familiar with this type of podcast, it's slightly different. I still interview someone, but we keep their identity anonymous, and the point of it is to allow them to be more honest about what they do as well as the industry they might be in. And sometimes for some people, when they want to share their journey, they want to remain anonymous because, for privacy reasons, it's not really that easy to tell your story publicly, especially when you're just recording this kind of live interview. And the way I record them, they tend to just be unedited. So a lot of the guests who are showing their identities have a lot of courage and bravery in doing so. And I'm not taking it away from the people who want to remain anonymous, but I'm just giving people choices. And so this is an anonymous series where I dig into my guest's journey of leaving the world of accounting and tax, very similar to mine, to pursue the world of product UXUI design at a startup. For those unfamiliar with product design in terms of what they do and maybe just the career field in general, I would recommend listening to episode 20 with Jason Lee, who now runs a product design agency called TomYum. And he's actually a school alumni who was in the field of accounting as well, but he made a very quick early transition into product design. So we talk a lot about that in our episode, in episode 20. But in this conversation, we talk about my guest experience leaving the coveted professional service world of accounting and tax, where the guest was actually in a position of a manager title, where it's not, I think, as easy for people to leave when they have committed that many years into a certain field and you are at a certain kind of title level, where sometimes it's easier to leave when you're just a junior. But as you become a manager, people feel like they're stuck and roped into that specialized career field. So we talk about that process. We talk about the decision-making process behind making the jump and what it was like taking a jump into the unknown, where the guest didn't have any prior background, where the guest didn't come from a creative field in high school or any other. The guest didn't really have, I would say, big creative endeavors that brought the person to always know about UX design. This just happened as the secular change in the market happened. And so this is a very fascinating, I think, interview where we go through a journey where someone just learns something and holds on to it and makes a change based on the facts that are currently present. And yeah, we talk deeper into the guest on his experience with bootcamps, what the pros and cons, their expectations going in, realizations coming out, the design job market in Toronto and kind of more Canada specifically, and just much more. This was a really fun conversation, and I really hope you get inspired and get something out of it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today is another anonymous podcast episode, and today we're going to be exploring the world of bootcamps as well as transitioning into the world of startups, specifically the world of design in the UX UI field, when you come from a business background. Specifically, this time it'll be accounting and tax. So today I have with me, as you know, I like to keep it anonymous, so we'll go with the continuous gender neutral Korean name, Min. Hi, Min. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Alrighty.
Big fan.
Appreciate it. And so, as I kind of alluded to in the intro, we're going to be talking about kind of your journey from going from the world of accounting, tax, and into the world of startups and design. From your experience around your peer groups and stuff, have you seen a lot of the transition, or do you see a lot of interest from your friends or colleagues, for example? Because I feel like from my surrounding group that it's a quite popular transition.
So transitioning from
the world of like business into design.
Yeah, I think it's happening more and more, especially when as boot camps grow more popular and there's more popping up in Toronto. I see a lot of people who, when they're considering a career transition, considering boot camps because it's a very short amount of time investment to basically obtain another skill under their belt so that they can have a quicker career transition. If they were to go to do another, let's say, university program, that would take like a year or two, which are generally the shorter ones. So I think the boot camps, whether you do a part-time boot camp or a full-time boot camp, it's a pretty good alternative if you want to speed up the process of jumping from one career to another.
Yeah, I think in our podcast in the past, we've had a previous guest. His name was Jason Lee, and he's currently running his own design agency. And so he was a alumni from my accounting school, and he transitioned into a career in design. And he had always been very passionate in design earlier on. He said in high school he was designing logos and stuff, and so he continuously taught himself to move into the field. For you, was that an option? Could you have you considered teaching yourself design and just doing it that way instead of doing a boot camp? Because I think some people, like boot camps, I think cost between $10,000 to like $15,000-$20,000 for the 3 months or so.
Yeah, so actually at the beginning of this entire process, when I was trying to decide how to transition into UX design from business, so boot camps, one of the things that really held me back about a boot camp was the significant cost behind it. For me, I wanted to focus on doing a full-time boot camp rather than a part-time boot camp. The part-time boot camps are generally around like $3,000 or something like that, whereas full-time, actually the prices have even gone up since I've done it, but they can range from $10,000 to like $14,000-$15,000, and these boot camps they're really condensed and they're generally for 10 or 12 weeks. So it is a significant investment. And so I was considering trying to teach myself because there are a lot of resources online that it was a viable option for me. But I think because I came from such a different field, and for me, my particular case, I've never really explored the world of design. I wasn't very I didn't really, delve into arts or sketching or anything that was particularly creative. So it was a space that was something I was really interested in, but something that was pretty foreign to me. And so I felt like the amount of time I needed to spend teaching myself all these different skills would be, I don't know, there wasn't really an end update, obviously. So I just felt like it would take a significant amount of time, and also the amount of resources that are out there on the internet is very overwhelming. And because I was still so new to it and I wasn't sure what was reliable, because basically anyone can publish a Medium blog post, and I would never really know whether or not the contents within it are reliable. Is it good content or not? I don't know. So I wanted kind of kind of like an intro foundation to kind of guide me, so that at least I have the basic skills. And then once I obtain the basic skills from the bootcamp, then I could continuously learn and develop my skills. So yeah, that being said, self-teaching was an option for me, but I wanted more direction, so that I could quickly learn whatever I need to learn, and give me a good basis to build off of.
Mm-hmm. And before we could dive deeper into the bootcamp world, I think what would be very fascinating, the reason I thought this would be a very fun episode to do for the audience to also listen to as well, is the amount of tenure you've had in your previous role in accounting and finance, accounting and tax. Because I find that it's relatively common to see people, quit being a big four accountant after 1 year and going into design, and because I think the feeling of this sunk cost fallacy, quote unquote, is just not as existent at that point compared to someone who stayed in the field longer. I think my experience has been that there's for some reason this guideline or tipping point of the quote unquote 2-year mark, where at least in consulting, or even I think in finance, everyone says, I'll stay for 2 years and then I'll decide. But from my experience in accounting, I think that's more the 3-year mark, because it takes us about 3 years to get the CPA designation. So for you, how long were you in that world for?
Specifically in tax?
Well, so I know you've done both accounting and tax.
Right.
So just that world in general, how long were you there?
So the program that I was in school, I started working as a co-op. Practical experience wise, I started in second year university. So from the time I actually got practical experience to when I quit, let's see, so second year, third year, fourth year, 1, 2, 3. So 6 years of practical experience in that world. And that's a combination of both accounting and tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a pretty significant amount of time, but because basically half of it was I obtained that experience as a student, I guess really 3 years was the full-time working experience I actually had before I decided to leave and pursue another career.
Mm-hmm. Well, so then when you were leaving, what quote-unquote title did you hold at that point?
So at the time that I was leaving, I was actually a manager within an international tax practice at a medium-sized accounting firm. So I was originally at a big four accounting firm, and then I switched over to a medium-sized accounting firm. There are various different reasons why I had done that. One of them being I kind of had a feeling that this wasn't an area I wanted to continue in. Tax wasn't really something I wanted to continue in, but I felt like I had already spent so much time trying to build my career in it. I wanted a little bit more perspective in terms of what else I could potentially learn and explore before I finally made the decision to leave it. So yeah, I just wanted to explore my options before I made the jump.
So when you moved from the Big Four to the medium-sized firm, you already implicitly had not pursuing tax as an option in the back of your mind?
Yeah, I think it was always something I thought about, but of course, you spend so much time like in university thinking about it and then working towards getting your designation. So it it felt like I felt like I had already known deep in my heart that I didn't want to do it because the work itself wasn't really all that fulfilling for me. So I felt like I knew pretty early on, but I just, because again, I spent so much time trying to pursue it, I felt like I needed to explore everything I could before I decided to leave.
Mm-hmm. And out of your group of colleagues, people in tax, do any of them leave that field? For example, because I'm thinking from my experience when I was in audit is the more general field for most accounting students to go into, and it's easy for people to leave. I think easier to people to leave audit and go. Most go into being controllers or some kind of finance and planning FP&A role inside just larger companies like banks and giant consumer packaged goods companies. But I find that taxes, people go from accounting into tax. Like I think they tend to specialize deeper into it. And I've from my experience, I've rarely seen people leave that field. Most people just stay in a Big Four or a medium-sized accounting firm and just continue down that hole, or they become super specialists and go into high net worth wealth management and they do tax for really rich people, things like that. So for your colleagues, did you see any leave, or did it end up just kind of doubling down into that road?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty rare for anyone to leave because, I mean, even so, the people that I worked with before I left, I had spoken to what I would say were my mentors, people that I worked really closely with, and just peers around me. And I really tried to figure out whether or not they liked it, the work that they were doing, and majority of the responses that I received were, "Oh, like it's okay, I can do it," and it wasn't like anyone was particularly passionate about this world of tax. I think there were probably, like, to be honest, like a handful of people that were, but majority of people, they didn't really like what they were doing. But because it brought them stable income and the hours were, I mean, like, I don't know. I wouldn't say it was decent, but it just brought them stable income, and they fell deeper and deeper into it. They got manager, and then they stayed a little bit longer, and they were considering leaving, and then they got senior manager, and then at that point, like, they felt like the money that they were making at that level, if they were to jump and do something else, because they were already in so deep and they were so niche into the field, it would be hard for them to make the same level of income, unless they were willing to take a pay cut. And I think most people were not willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty rare for people to leave tax and pursue a different career. So yeah, for me, that's why I wanted to leave as early as possible. And it wasn't, in my point of view, a risky thing that I was doing, because I knew I could always just go back. There's always demand for people in tax. There's always way too much work and not enough people. So I knew if I made this switch and I really wanted to go back, I could, but it isn't really an option that I want to take.
Right. It's like fire insurance. You never really want to have to use it.
Yeah.
You just buy it just in case.
Yeah. So now I just have my CPA, and it's just
collecting dust.
Yeah. It's just there if I need to really use it. But yeah, I'm hoping I don't need to.
But I'm guessing because you specialize and you stayed actually in in a field long enough time to be a manager. I think most people takes on average, I would say at earliest 5 years, I think is like the fastest I've seen someone get manager. And it can take as long as even like 7 to 8 years, I think, for people to hit that manager title inside an accounting firm. And so since you've left with that title, do you feel that the insurance options are just much more stable because of that compared to if you had left earlier?
Yeah, I definitely think so because I did have at least 1 year of experience as a manager before I left, so I think can still take away those skills that I gathered from not just the technical skills but also the management and all those different like handling administrative tasks, multitasking, blah blah blah, handling staff underneath you, handling clients. I do have those skills, so I think having at least 1 year of that under my belt would make it a lot easier if I wanted to jump back into it.
Well, I think a part that I'm more curious on, not more, but I think might be also more helpful to gain more light on is my experience just in terms of careers in general just has been that it doesn't really matter as much what you actually know what you can do. It's rather what other people think you can do matters more, because you could be a senior or a staff who does work at a manager level, but if they don't see it, the title, no one really cares. And so for you though, just having the title alone, has it mattered? Has it shown as, oh, this is actually working? Like, or have you had recruiters like reach out to you while you were in boot camps, or do you know they can go back to any of the firms that you worked at and just get a job instantly?
Yeah, I think that I do agree with that point where a lot of people put, like, I think possibly even too much weight on the title you hold. But yeah, again, having that title as a manager would definitely make it a lot easier because even during boot camps, or even before boot camps, people were reaching out to me a lot on LinkedIn, trying to recruit me for all these different roles. And then even while I was in boot camp, people were recruiting me, trying to get me back to going into these tax or accounting related roles. So I definitely think it does help with that process.
And so you pointed out though that when you were leaving that you didn't feel like it was a big risk, and it seemed that you also had the certainty that this was not what you wanted to do, and so you wanted to take the jump. But can you walk me through the process of what were the challenging parts, if any, of making that decision and taking the leap into making the transition, going full time into boot camp, not knowing this world? As you said, you don't really have prior experience in design. It's a new field. What was the kind of decision process like there?
So, like, what I considered when I was trying to make my transition.
Yeah, like what you considered, as well as just what was the experience like? Can you kind of paint the picture for me?
Yeah, it was honestly, so it was pretty difficult. I had a pretty rough time, a rough year, uh, before I had decided to quit. And I think going through that definitely made me reevaluate what I was doing. Um, there was just different circumstances um, kind of built up, and all these different factors led up to me deciding to quit. I always thought I would find another role or another position at a company before I decided to actually leave. So I think it really got like last year. So that's when November of last year, decided to quit without having anything lined up because I felt like I really needed that time and space um, to gather my thoughts and figure out my next steps. Um, and one of the things that led me to making this decision is I spent so much time working towards something that I wasn't even really all that interested in or passionate about. So I really questioned what if, like in my head, it was what if I had spent all this time towards something I had actually liked. And so I think I also, another breaking point for me was when I asked myself, if this was the only thing I did until retirement, so if I had stayed in tax up until retirement, would I be okay with that? And the fear that I had from asking myself that question, I think really shook me. And that was honestly probably a really pivotal moment for me when I was like, oh my God, there's no way. If I did this for the rest of my life until retirement, like no, that would be the worst scenario for me. So I think that was really the defining moment when I decided like this, like I really need to make a change. And um of course it was really scary for me to quit without having anything lined up, without any foreseeable future or path. It just like all of a sudden everything that was in front of me kind of just felt like it had vanished and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't like design, I hadn't fully decided on pursuing UX design when I left. There were all these different opportunities I was trying to explore before I'd left, but I knew like my mental state, I would not be able to hang on until the end of the year. So I just, even though I felt a lot of guilt, letting my team down because I knew the amount of work they had to do, I just, it was a really tough decision. But I just felt like I had to make it because no one was going to look out for me other than myself. So it definitely was a really tough decision coming up to that. And um, the process, so after I quit in November, um, went on vacation. And then when I got back, it was Christmas parties and New Year's parties. And then January hit. And that's when things started slowing down. And I'm like, what the heck am I doing? I just quit my job. I just started applying to jobs because I felt like I had to do it and I felt like I had to do something. So I was applying to these jobs, doing these, like getting these interviews. And at first,
Was it like business jobs again, or what kind of jobs?
yeah, so I was applying to customer success roles because I felt like that would be the easiest transition. I knew I didn't want to do accounting or tax, so I didn't apply to any of those jobs. So I was trying to say, like, see what other transferable skills I could have so that I could get a job as quick as possible while still utilizing the skills that I felt like I had obtained. So a lot of like client service skills, and I felt like that would be really applicable for the customer success roles. And I wanted a complete change in environment, so I was applying to a lot of startups because I've worked at large corporations for so long. I kind of knew what that was like, and I wanted to explore something that was very different from um, what I was used to. So I was applying to customer success roles and getting interviews for places that I didn't really care too much about, but um, I was just doing it because I felt like I had to get back into the groove um, of practicing my job interview skills. And there was one particular startup where I went into the fourth round of interviews, and by this time it was February, and I don't know. I ended up giving them a call before I was supposed to have my fourth interview, and I just told them, like, I don't want to waste your time. Like, this is, I don't think this is what I want to do. Um, let's just, um, let's just, I guess, end it here for now because I know your resources are valuable and so are mine. And that person, he was great because he was like, oh, I really thought it was going somewhere and I'm kind of disappointed. But if you change your mind and you want to talk again in 3 to 6 months, then feel free to reach out to me. So I felt like I had a lot, like still had a lot of options, but at that point, I think him saying that to me made me feel a lot more comfortable that, okay, even if I don't do an accounting or tax role, I can still find a role in a different uh, career path, I guess. So then I decided to take a bit more time to think about what my next steps are, and then I always found myself going back to UX design, and it was something that was really fascinating to me. So I just decided to just jump right into the bootcamp, just so I could streamline everything and if it didn't work out, if I had done the boot camp and it wasn't something I was actually interested in, yeah, I lost $10,000, but at least I spared myself some time, because if I was self teaching myself, it could have taken me like over a year or something to get into the actual field.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you make, because I think a lot of people, I tell my friends about this a lot of times, about how money is just a tool, and I find it's just a tool to really buy you time. As it's really what it is, right? People use money. I buy clothes because I don't want to spend my time learning how to make clothes and make it myself. So then that's why I pay people. I go to a restaurant because I don't want to learn how to cook and make that fancy meal, so I pay someone for that, for their time of learning all that, and using that $10,000 to buy yourself a year's worth of self-teaching. I think, yeah, that's definitely like a great use of time that I hope more people think about in that context, in terms of how you can use money, instead of as absolute terms of, oh, it's $10,000. Right. It took me X amount of hours to make that money, but what is that going to be used for? And right. I think that's the return on investment mindset that I think doesn't hit upon people very quickly, or sometimes as a first thought. It I think needs to be thought about a little more for some people to maybe hit upon that. For you though, there were a couple of follow-up questions I had in mind as you were telling me your story, but I might have lost one of them. I'm trying to think. What was it? Oh, when you called back and told them that, oh, you're not going to do the interview the fourth round anymore. I think that's a very mature and respectable move you made, because I don't know of many people who, when they're progressing through interviews, to actually have the mental maturity to kind of take a step back, evaluate it, and say, oh yeah, I'm going to be respectful, and because I don't think I'm going to take it even if I get the offer, I'm just going to call them and let them know that. Because most people I know will go through the full process, get the offer, and try to not haggle, but negotiate, let's say, quote unquote, and try to get a lot of money somehow. And if they get that money, they'll somehow find a way to validate that and take the job. I've known plenty of people who've done that. Plenty of consultant friends, like especially like consulting, will go into other consulting firms and be like, yeah, like I don't even like what I do, but I'm going to just do this interview, get the full round, and get the offer, and just see if they're going to pay me 20-30% more, and then just maybe take it or maybe not. But they go through with it. Why did you call and decide not to go through with it? And kind of as a follow-up as well, like, what was it that made you have the confidence to say, this isn't it, I want to hold out and look at something else?
I guess so. At that point, I felt like I had made such a significant change. I had already made the jump of quitting my job to find something that I liked. And as I was going through the interview process, I don't know, I just at the back of my mind, I felt like UX was just something I still wanted to pursue. And so I didn't want to just take this job just for the sake of having income, a stable income, so that I wouldn't have to worry about it. I just felt like if I had already committed to looking for something that I wanted to do, I need to go full into it. So I wanted to also be respectful of other people's time as well. And that's why I'd called them and said, hey, like, I don't want to waste your time. Let's not continue on with this. But at the same time, I still wanted to keep, like, having good relationships is a pretty key role for me, like, because I mean, my mom's like, growing up, my mom's always said you never know um, when you might need help from another person, so always make sure you maintain your relationships, and and make sure you try and step in their shoes, and like, if I was in their shoes, I would have wanted that person to um, let me know if they actually weren't serious about considering it. Because I know for it's hard with the startup, they don't have the most resources in the world. They're not like a large company, so every bit of time and every bit of money that they have really counts for them. And I don't know, I just didn't want to be that person that was just taking the job just to have income for myself, and just do, like, it wasn't like I would do a subpar job even though I didn't care about it, but I don't know, I just don't want to waste my time or their time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this constant curiosity, interest in UX, UI, like product design as a field, how did it start and how did it continue growing? Was because you said it was never really an interest, like you weren't in this kind of artistic, creative mindset growing up. That wasn't really even much of a consideration, it seems. How did it all kind of begin and really pick up flame as something serious enough for you to invest time and money into pursuing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, um, I myself didn't realize. So I think when you kind of assess your own strengths and weaknesses, you never really can assess it properly and objectively. So someone around me had actually told me that this would be a career that I could potentially be really great at, or something that I'd at least be interested in. And so that's when I started looking into it. And he had a friend that was already in the field already. So I could, like, just talk to him and ask him questions about the field itself. So it was, to be honest, like, having someone around me that knew me well, and introducing me to the field really helped me, um, even just discover this world of UX, because I feel like it's like a new and up and coming thing. It's not even a really big thing. I feel like it's been kind of floating around, but there's been different names for it, like web design and things like that. But it isn't actually fully the same as UX, I guess. But yeah, just having someone around me that really knew me well, um, kind of opened my eyes to what other, like, potential areas I could look into.
Mm-hmm. And but after you, I guess, like, learn about it, I guess did it just click as obvious? Like how could you how can you tell? Like, how do you know it's this is the thing, or this is just does it just continuously nag at you as this is a thing to look into?
Yeah, it was. So I don't know. I feel like growing up, I had this um, like, ability in me to keep hacking at things even when I really didn't like it. So even if I wasn't fully interested in something, I could just put a lot of effort and time into it, because I was told if you were good in math or, like, sciences or whatever, then you'd be successful. And so I never really explored any of my creative abilities, and I never thought of myself as a very creative person. Um, and and so I never really, the idea of going into a field that was design related was never a possibility for me. Or like, I mean, it felt like it was really hard to make money in something like that. So growing up, I always felt like I had to find a very stable career, and being the oldest in my family, I felt like I had the responsibility of taking on, um, like, helping out with my family and getting a stable career. And by having a stable career, it felt like I was able to become a good role model for my younger siblings. And so, I forgot what your question was.
My question was, it was on how did you know like this was something to
Oh,
look into?
right. Okay. So I was getting to it. But then I ended up forgetting what I was trying to make a point about. So once I found out about this whole design world, I just felt myself being really drawn to it, and I'd go out with some friends at night, and it'd be like 12, like midnight or 1 a.m. by the time I got back, and I still found myself going on, um, like online and searching up things related to the design because it was so interesting to me, and it was so different from what I was used to. So I think that really piqued my interest, and yeah, it was just something that I kept going back to, and that's kind of I just kind of held on to that and just decided to make that transition.
And so then as you're going through the boot camp, like what were your expectations of the boot camp going into it, and how had that changed, if at all?
Yeah, so I had actually considered. I went to some info sessions for the boot camp before I had even quit my full time job. But at the time, I didn't feel like I would get enough out of it simply because I guess I had this like uh, predisposition where, I mean, this is a boot camp, it's not an actual university. How reliable can it be? And like, I'm getting a certificate. Like, that sounds pretty pathetic to me. So I was really hesitant. And also, I didn't really know the caliber of people that I would be surrounding. It sounds really bad, but I didn't know the caliber of people that I would be surrounding myself with, and the caliber of the people that were actually teaching me. Like, how do I know they actually knew their stuff? And it just, because it wasn't a super established institution, and I just felt like I was very skeptical, and even the people that were participating in these like boot camps, or yeah, going through these boot camps, I didn't feel like they were of the same caliber I was used to, because going to a university, um, especially at a very competitive program, there's a certain like standard of people that I'm used to being around, and these people were definitely not at that level. I mean, just to give an example of some of the people that were in my class. I don't know, someone came from like the film industry, and another person came from like some sort of arts degree from OCAD, and so it was like, and some people came from like a college, so it was definitely like a hodgepodge of different types of people with different types of experiences, that were going into these boot camps. So I don't know. I think I was just very skeptical of whether or not I would actually learn anything or take anything valuable away from it. And like that price tag that was behind it was really making it difficult as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know if I really need to defend that perspective, because I think that's a very fair perspective. But just in case maybe the audience members might like misunderstand or anything, but I can totally relate, because yeah, I think it's very fair to say that there is a certain caliber of people that you expect. Like I went to a very competitive program. I was in the world of the top companies in accounting, consulting, and investing, and it's true that if you like, I've never been in the bottom 80% of anything I've ever done.
Yeah.
And so you kind of expect that, right? Like high school, of course you're all gonna have straight A's. Yeah. It's a given. Yeah. You go to university, of course you're gonna be dean's honor list. It's a given. Yeah. It's like, that's just what I've always been used to, and that's what I expect
Mhm.
from people that I work with. And like you work in the big four. Like I've had bosses where like managers, senior managers who, yeah, like I see them make like staffs cry because they can't handle the amount of questioning and I guess kind of drilling in that these smart people will do. And I'll talk to the manager and I'll tell them, you know, we'll chat about, hey man, did you really have to make her cry? And he'll straight up tell me, well, she was incompetent. She's not smart enough to get this. And yeah, like that's the kind of, if you're coming from that kind of world, which I can totally relate with, you expect a certain level. And obviously I know you're not implying this either, and I'm not saying that people who go through film or anything is not as smart.
Yeah,
but they don't have. I don't think they have gone through the similar kind of hurdles that people like you and I have gone through to go through this kind of world. Sure, there's different hurdles in film. I think it's a way harder world to be successful in than
for sure.
business. I think if you're actually successful in like the film industry, then you are way up there. Like I can't even imagine the kind of shit you got to go through to be number one in that. But that's a boom bust kind of industry. Whereas for us, it's just constantly grinding, and you just got to be above the like in the top 20% at like certain things, and you can just make it into like a certain level. But obviously, there's no big win in this kind of world because of that. Right. But yeah, I think that's a very valuable point, because I think there's a lot of skepticism around that for sure, and I think I wasn't really even aware of it until when I saw colleagues in the accounting world or consulting world exit. So when we say exit, quote unquote, it's when you leave the professional service world, this ivory tower of all these type A, ultra competitive people, and then you enter industry, which we call like banks, consumer packaged goods companies, those kind of large behemoths. And then you find you're working with people who are not used to that level, where I think I've had one time when even I was talking to a startup, and this person, I think she was in like HR or something, or operations, was telling me, oh, like you don't understand how hard we work in startups. Like it's not like a 9 to 5, you know, sometimes you have to stay till like 8 p.m. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, you have no idea how hard accountants work. Like I'm going through 100-hour work weeks as easy. Like you go through 120-hour work weeks, then it's hard. But it's different, right? They don't know our world. You don't know their world. And I think, though, I didn't realize that there was a different world out there until my friends started exiting, and they're telling me, and they complain about, I can't believe this person went home at 5. I expect them to like stay until 10 p.m. to finish this. What do you mean you'll give it to me tomorrow? That doesn't exist in the kind of world that we're from. And I think that's definitely funny, because you've just left that world, and now you're kind of thinking about...
Exactly, kind of hypocrite.
Yeah, right. Like, but like you're imposing your kind of standards from that world onto this transition point. And so you had that perspective from boot camps, but you still decided to do it. Yeah, it seems. And has it changed after you came out of the boot camp? Like, what was it like actually going through it, though?
I definitely think me going into the boot camp, there are pros and cons to it, of course. So, I mean, I just mentioned how I was worried about going into boot camp because I was like, I don't know what the caliber of people that are going to be in there. Like, for me, I feel like I'm a pretty ambitious person. So, like, I think just when I met all these people from all these different backgrounds, it really opened up my perspective in terms of what else there is in the world, because I was, like I said, surrounded with the same type or similar type of people. I was always around people that were in accounting or some sort of business or finance role, and then their friends that I met were also in a similar thing, some sort of business role. And so I think going into this boot camp and meeting people from all these different careers, like interior design, again, like film, and like marketing, and being a freelance makeup and hairstylist, that definitely opened up my perspective on the world and how it's there's a lot of different valuable things that each person can bring to the table. So like for me, I felt like my strengths were in like, I don't know, um, numbers or like analytics and stuff like that, and other people were a lot stronger in the more creative side, like the arts and things like that. So uh, I felt like my perspective on measuring um, people's abilities change because there are, of course, different scales. Some people are smarter when it comes to, or not smarter, but like a lot better when it comes to something that's creative. For me, that was really difficult, and I felt like I really took um, that perspective away from this boot camp, and it definitely allowed me to interact more with other people that were also trying to go through a similar transition because almost everyone in this boot camp was doing a second career transition, and so it helped. I think with that process for me transitioning from like something that was so different into this whole design career. So the collaborative aspect of it was very valuable as well. But sometimes, like, because the curriculum itself at the boot camps weren't um, very standardized, they were very flexible. So they would ask us for feedback and tweak the program based on the feedback that we would give them. So that made me feel almost uneasy about it at times because I was like, does that mean like do they know what they're doing or are they just changing things up as they go and are we just like a bunch of test bunnies or test like lab rats for them? So there definitely are pros and cons. A lot of the times the theoretical stuff that they would teach me, it seemed very common sense. Um,
Can you name for examples?
like, um, let me think. I don't know, just certain psychological. Like, I have an interest in psychology, so maybe it was obvious to me, but might not necessarily be obvious to others. So, like certain psychological like behaviors that we would pay more attention to in some like in a particular lesson, I was like, I felt like I already knew all this stuff, and it just felt like a waste of time for me. And I had taught myself Sketch and all these different softwares within design itself. So like I felt like the research I had previously done was being covered again in school. So it, I mean, might not, it just felt like it didn't give me as much value as it could have. But what I really liked is just being able to collaborate and actually work on projects and having that like application part of it and working with other designers because if I had self-taught myself I wouldn't have been able to it would have been a lot harder for me to work with other designers um, to come up with these different case studies and things like that to add to my portfolio. So I definitely think there are pros and cons to doing the boot camp. Would I go back? Right now, the boot camp that I had done, they raised the price to $12,000, and I don't know that just that additional $2,000. I don't know. It would make my decision even harder. I think, especially knowing what I know now.
And I think there's a presumption that once you do the boot camp that jobs are gonna fly your way, and
Right.
like that's what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
The point is to speed your way into to a career transition. But has that been the case for your colleagues? Like you're currently working in the UX design field right
Yeah.
now, but what about the rest of them? Like, what's the percentage like from what you know?
Uh, so when I got a job, so before I had graduated my program, a lot of the people that I was speaking to who were alumni were essentially saying, yeah, it takes around 3 to 6 months for you to find a job. And so I was prepared. I was like, okay, it's going to take me 6 months. so that I had some sort of expectation before I actually found a job. So I finished the program in June, late June, and then I spent a month just working on my portfolio, and then I didn't start applying until really like late into that 1 month mark after graduation.
So end of July,
Yeah,
August-ish.
so end of July, August-ish, and then I got pretty lucky because I was doing a portfolio review at school, and it turns out they were also they also had an opening. So I had interviewed for the job without really realizing that I was interviewing for it. So I'd gotten pretty lucky, and I was only really the second person in my class of 10 other people to get a job.
So 12 total.
Away.
Right?
Yeah. No, 11.
11.
Yeah, 11 people. Because 10 other people, including myself. So
Oh, I
11.
see.
Yeah. And then I think since then, 2 more people have found a job. So I think 4 people, but now we're how many months out now? So July, August, September.
Yeah, we're recording this 1st of October.
Yeah, so I mean, like 3 or 4 months out. Not even half of us have found a job. So I think, I mean, they said the cutoff was around like 6 months, so they still have some time. But talking to some of my other classmates, they have been, telling me about the struggle of actually finding a job because most people are looking for senior designers. There's a lot of jobs out there for senior designers, but if you're a junior, they're not like it's really tough to look for a position as a junior because everyone wants senior designers, but you can't really get to that point without having the initial experience. So it's for them, it's been really tough, and I know they've been getting pretty discouraged because either they've been getting rejections or just not been getting any replies at all. And I think after you go through that several times, it gets, I don't know, pretty discouraging. I remember I was talking to one of my friends, and she's like, "I've run out of jobs to apply to." So yeah, it's definitely been pretty tough. And even the class before mine, the cohort before mine, I think a lot of them are still looking for jobs. Maybe perhaps like half of them are still looking for jobs. So I don't know. It's pretty tough.
Do you find that, like you mentioned how in the bootcamp you were skeptical because of the caliber of people that would be in the bootcamp, and then you mentioned how everyone comes from different backgrounds, but I'm obviously biased, but I think people who come from professional service backgrounds have a certain kind of work ethic and just the ability to grind through things, and we're just trained in a certain way, right? And so I'm wondering, did it ever come about where your background was actually very material in getting interviews or actually getting this particular job? Like, did it kind of shine out as a differentiator while you're in the boot camp or while you're in the job search?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that because that it actually did have a material impact. So the 2 paying jobs that I got from design. So the first one came about when I was still in the program, and basically someone connected with me through LinkedIn because they were looking for a UX designer. And when I spoke to him on the phone, he was like, "Hey, the reason why I connected with you because I saw you had a CPA background, and I just thought it was really cool how you were transitioning from CPA." And I think like he was essentially alluding to the fact that it seemed like I was more reliable than perhaps other freelance UX designers out there because I had a professional designation, because he was a lawyer. So I don't know if that it seemed like it did have an impact on him reaching out to me. And so that was my first freelance gig that I completed basically immediately after I finished my boot camp. So that was one instance where my background really did have an impact. And then this current job that I have, so they made it pretty obvious or explicit that one of the reasons why they're considering me is because basically this company really values um, the people itself. They don't really necessarily look at your current experience. And so they actually hire a lot of people that had come from different backgrounds. So, for example, there's been a couple of people on the development team who basically have come from completely different backgrounds. One guy was a nuclear engineer, had no coding or like any sort of background like that, but they hired him and they're basically paying him to learn code at the moment. There's another guy. He was basically doing cancer research, and now he's on the dev team, and he had not known any code before he really like. I think he started learning a little bit, but they really value uh, the the person and what they can bring to the table over what existing skills they have. So I think having a specific background definitely did help me in my specific case in terms of landing the opportunities that I did when it came to starting in this new career.
And I can't believe we didn't cover this, but I think if we were to, because this is still an anonymous podcast, and so you don't have to tell us your company name, but how would you, I guess, like if you were to segmentize the company, is like as a startup, what round of funding would you say you guys are at, like seed, Series A? How many people are there?
So my company right now is a startup. They received seed funding, but they're in the process of raising Series A funding at the moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so there's around 30 of us.
How many people in the design team that you're currently working on?
So there's including myself 5 people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And right now, like, then you're one of the success cases. You've done the boot camp. You're in the job that you wanted to, and I'm gonna guess that you're enjoying it. I'm gonna guess that you're happier than you were in tax.
Oh, for sure. Like the fact that I'm being paid to do something that I actually like. I didn't think that was a possibility. I don't know. It just always seemed like you had to hate your job, or even if you didn't hate your job, it was just something you like just did. Just to pay the bills. And yeah, of course everyone's like, "Oh, like it would be wonderful for me to like get a job where I can get paid to do what I want." But I feel like that's so rare. That is so rare. Most people are either just okay with what they're doing, or they completely hate it and they complain about it. And I felt like because I was in this whole accounting/tax world, it felt like a normal thing for me. And everyone was either hating their jobs and like completely miserable with their lives, or they were just like, yeah, like I don't know, it pays the bills, like I have a family I need to feed. And so it just seemed normal to me. So the fact that I'm being paid to do something I'm actually interested in, it's mind blowing. And I have absolutely no regrets in making this transition at all. I mean, it's still pretty early on, but yeah, I'm pretty happy right now with where I am.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's awesome to hear. And I mean, like, then I'm going to guess that your classmates or colleagues, when they see what you do, they must be curious, or they must have, I don't know, maybe some regret not jumping. Like what do you find it has been very like the common case where like people, I don't know, maybe they'll say things like, "Oh, I wish I could do what you do," but they don't, or
that's happened so many times, over and over again. I mean, at the time last year, I was basically in the same position as a lot of my friends. They were really miserable with what they were doing at work, like actually miserable.
were they all in accounting as well?
Yeah. Accounting/tax, and then also pretty high like accounting job. Sorry, I was just going through all the different people, and I was like, accounting. So at the time when I was considering leaving, we were basically, and these are conversations that I've had with separate people. It's not like we meet up in a group and we're like, yeah, like we're so miserable, blah blah blah. It's like I've met it with one friend and she's like, I hate my job right now, I want to quit, and another friend would basically go through the same things. At the time, I was talking to 3 or 4 different people and they're going through the exact same thing. One person took a leave of absence at the same time I quit my job, and so I was really excited for her too because I was like, yes, like, we can figure this out together. What we're gonna do in terms of our next careers, because we knew like she also didn't want to do anything accounting related as well. So unfortunately, she ended up just going back to the same job when her leave of absence ended. But she's still equally as miserable. So all of my other friends, like the other 3 people that I've been talking to, basically have just stayed. They haven't done anything to make any change. Oh, actually, well, one person jumped from a public accounting place to industry, but it's still tax related. So, I mean, I guess she kind of made a change. Now she kind of has a 9 to 5 job, but she still is not really interested in the work itself. So a lot of people do say they want to change their careers because they hate what they're doing, but no one has really committed to actually changing it.
What do you think is the differentiating factor?
I think so. One of the things that really helped me was the like people that I have that are surrounding me. So having someone that fully supports you and encourages you to make that change. Just having even just one person around you that gives you that support, I think, really helped push me to take control of my life and say, yeah, no, life is short. I don't want to be miserable for the rest of my life. So just having that one person really, I think, can make a significant difference. And for them, I don't think they have anyone around them that really pushes them and 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 challenges them. So I think that's probably maybe like the main reason why they haven't made that jump.
So like for you, then was it like a partner that you have?
Yeah. So just because that person is someone I really confide in, um, it definitely gave me the strength to say, okay, yeah, I think it's okay if I decide to completely change my career.
Mm-hmm. And how do you advise people when they come and they tell you, oh, I want to do what you're doing. I want to quit. I want to have the strength to quit.
Yeah.
And I want to do a boot camp. Or should I do a boot camp? Like, what do you say to people nowadays?
I tell them to do it. Like I don't know. I feel like I have really tried to convince them and sometimes tried to even help figure out what they want to do. I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily like the best person in terms of assessing what they're great at, because I feel like for me, because I spent so much time with my partner, he was able to tell me exactly what I was looking for, because I feel like he knows me better than I know myself. So like I try to help my friends figure out what they want, and I try to give them some suggestions and some sort of direction in terms of what they can look into. But at the end of the day, it's really up to them to really commit and do that, and they just, I guess, haven't had the confidence or the drive to actually make that change.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully, other people who may be listening to this can think about that, and maybe they'll get inspired somehow to see yourself as a case that worked.
Right, and I was also hoping that, I don't know, by me making this change and doing it somewhat successfully, that it could set a good example for them so that they themselves could make a similar transition into something that they were really interested in. But I don't know, I guess I think too highly of myself. I don't have that much influence in their lives, so they haven't really changed. They'll say like, "Oh yeah, that's great, congratulations, I wish I could do that," but I don't know, they just haven't committed to it.
Maybe they just need time.
Yeah, they might need time.
I've had friends, some they make changes after years.
Yeah.
After, I'm not saying I'm the person that sparks it, but like after I've had conversations with them about changing or doing something for themselves, sometimes it takes years for them to, I think, take the leap. Sometimes it's faster.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everyone's at a different pace. But regardless, thanks so much for coming on the podcast to share your story with myself and the audience. I hope they definitely got a lot out of it. I enjoyed having this conversation, and I hope you did as well.
Yeah, no problem. I had a lot of fun talking about myself. Thanks so much for having me. I hope the listeners, users, I'm such a UX design person, really got something out of this. And honestly, for anyone that's listening right now and is considering a career change, I know it's pretty scary. And I know just up and quitting your job without having anything lined up is probably like maybe not the best thing to do, but at the time, for me, in my case, it felt like the right thing to do. And I encourage anyone to just make that leap, and just do it. Honestly, like, if you make sure you keep your connections at your old position, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to have you back. So setting that safety net for yourself so that you can make the leap, like, honestly, just go and do it, because life's too short to keep doing something you hate. So
awesome. That's a good place to end it off. All right, take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope the story was inspiring to you. Hopefully it also helped you expand your perspectives. Hopefully it also made you question the default path that you might have been going on, or the default beliefs you might have had. And maybe now it'll make you even think about doing something about it, doing something different, maybe challenging yourself, being courageous. Who knows? But regardless, I'm really happy that you took some time out of your day to listen to this fantastic story with my guest. And if you would like to somehow, in some way, contribute and help support the podcast, and maybe even just be part of the community that I'm trying to build with the greater OMD Ventures platform, really think about being a stakeholder in the platform. And the quick way to do that is to go to my website, oldmandan.com, and go to the stakeholders page. I believe it's oldmandan.com/stakeholder. And the link is also down below. And that's how you can figure out how you can subscribe, follow to get more updates on the free content. But at the same time, also donate. And donate by actually just buying me a coffee. That's just how I put it. And you can buy me a coffee a month, coffee a week, or coffee every day of the year. And think about it as the way that, if you wanted to chat with me, you might just bring me out for coffee and buy me a coffee. Or if you wanted to bring one of my guests out to chat, you might buy them a coffee. So just think of it as I'm the service that's doing that for you, so you can just pay me in coffees. Don't worry, everything will still be free. It would just really help if you would like to show your support this way, so that I can use the coffee money to buy myself actual coffees, and also to buy my guests actual coffees, and use the leftover money to actually grow the platform, as well as even keep it operationally alive as well, because all this isn't really free, and it does take a lot of time to build it as well as operate it and hopefully grow it further. So your support would be amazing if you would like to contribute. And so just check out the website, go to the stakeholders page, and read the different kind of benefits you might even get as a stakeholder. All right, thank you.